Activate Your Introvert, the weekly show to help leaders build performance by understanding introversion. In this week's show, where is the boundary between work and socialising? And what's that got to do with introversion? A discussion with Noran Bajagal. Noran is the co-founder and COO of Xerxes Inc. Xerxes is an open source marketing platform. Think like HubSpot and Intercom. But one other thing that makes it interesting. Noran's company is in Mongolia. That means we can talk about introversion and leadership in a different political context, because it's much more, as Noran says, a traditional socialist setting. Are introverts or extroverts more egotistical is this week's question. And finally, did she really apologise? Just before speaking to Noran, it's been an interesting couple of weeks in the news, and I wonder if that led to this week's question from Philip. Although, before telling you the question, I of course want to apologise, insofar as the question wasn't made with the intention of insulting anybody. I didn't realise it was a controversial question, and only consider it for 25 minutes. Maybe not then. Moving on to the question, which is about being egotistical. Are introverts or extroverts more egotistical? And we will come back to that later in the show. Because one item in the news this week, of course, is the modern art of apologising without apologising. If anything I said this morning has been misconstrued to the opposite effect, I want to apologise for that misconstruction. Great phrase, isn't it? In other words, it's your fault and I'm not really apologising. It's easy to think that it's just politicians who need to appear empathetic without losing face. But it's not. It's something that many leaders and managers do, quite possibly without realising. How many times have you heard things like, "I want to apologise for," when a manager speaks to a team? Wanting to do something is not the same as doing it, and wanting to appear empathetic or contrite is not the same as doing it. It's something that often sneaks into conferences too. I was recently speaking at an event and listened to the MC say, "I would like to welcome our next speaker, expert in leadership, productivity and introversion, John Baker." I didn't say anything, but did hope that I really had been welcomed. As for the "I would like to" part of the sentence, I would like to be invited to speak at your event if you're looking for a speaker to deliver a clear message on getting more from their team, including the quiet third of that team. But moving back to the point I'm making, I think we all need to consider the language we use sometimes, as some phrases, like "I want to," have slipped into common use. One other thing that I've been thinking a lot about this week, which affects many introverts, is where is the boundary between work, team building and socialising? I really do think that the difference between a work event and a social event has a porous boundary, and I raise it as that affects many introverts. Let's start with two basic points. If a team of people know each other, have some camaraderie, and there's a team spirit, they are more likely to be a productive team. Teams like this get more done, spark off of each other, help each other out, and the team leader doesn't have to constantly give instructions. And number two, if the team understand each other, their personalities and strengths in a wider setting than just work, they're more likely to perform well together. So that's straightforward. And that's where the idea of team building events and having some semi-work social teamwork things come in from. Many formal team building events where people go and play games lack any real purpose or structure and don't work, but that's not really what I'm talking about today. Semi-socialising after work, during the lunch hour, with pizza, cheese or a glass of wine, could help that team grow together and could thus easily be considered an important part of work. And that's where the porous boundary between the two can start to appear. But team members don't need to be in each other's pockets, and socialising together all the time, in fact, may make performance worse. The extroverts in the team are likely to love the idea of spending time chatting less formally with other team members, depending on how much privacy they're expected to give away, but that's totally separate to extroversion and introversion. The introverts in your team are more likely to struggle with some of the semi-social situations, mainly because of feeling de-energized through spending a lot of time with people, also through a dislike of small talk and pointless, in their view, interaction, both of which come probably from losing energy by spending time with others. And yes, I'm outdoors today, by the way, if you're wondering why there's a crow going mad, simply because builders are attacking the office upstairs. Here's the thing though, most introverts I've interviewed like to be part of a strong, cohesive group of people who know each other well, who they get on with. So my conclusion, helping a team to bond in a more social setting helps performance, but don't just insist on team social activities, which might be with cheese and wine. Create some structure around you, help the team to socialise, and it will help your introverts. None of this should, of course, be considered suggesting you break any COVID rules which may or may not exist. I've just been thinking a lot about that semi-porous boundary between work and chatting after work. I think it's time to speak to Noran. Welcome, Noran.
Hi, thank you very much for having me, John.
So it'd be really interesting in a minute to talk about your role as COO, especially in the tech industry, where at least stereotypically many people are introverts. I'd also be quite interested to overlay this whole managing different people thing along with in a country where perhaps there's other styles and cultures are politically as much as anything going on. So I'd really like to talk about that. But first of all, I just want to ask you about yourself. Are you an introvert or an extrovert? And probably more importantly, what does that mean to you?
I am very much introvert. What I think introvert person is not really like a shy to communicate people, like more of a people who enjoy being alone. Talking a lot is getting your energy, like it's just rather being on your own or with like some of your close friends, and really just enjoy doing things by yourself, that kind of person. I think probably because the most of my career has been at the back of the office, as I've got the finance background.
Okay.
Doing a lot of crunching numbers at the back of the office. Yeah. So yeah, there's not a lot of public talking, presenting, so.
So as you started to create the company, as you said, you're one of the three founders. How did that go? Because obviously at that point, there's a lot of intensity, I would imagine, of three people working closely together and having to learn to communicate well. And then obviously communicating with employees and contractors as the company has grown bigger. What have you learned from that?
I think managing people is one of the biggest challenges that I have faced. So when I start this company, I start like finding this managing people is a lot more difficult than crunching numbers or like my main role, that's like.
What makes it difficult?
Because everybody's different, like understanding those people and finding the key to work without those people together is like huge challenge for me initially. Working with the people requires a lot of energy and a lot of patience, and also like really clever, like KPI, I would say, the methodology to work with those people. So yeah, I'm still learning it. I can't say I mastered this part, but
I don't think any of us ever do.
Yes.
So when you were first working as a team with just the three of you, I guess like many teams, there's, shall we say, at different points, there's different egos are coming up and sometimes they get in the way. Did you experience that at all?
I think like three of us initially, and as well as even now, like when I see it from our like newly joined team members, I found that there's a lot of ego that we had to break in some points. And because of those so like really big egos, sometimes you miss the really important parts, like really important factors or abilities, or maybe like some suggestions that that person are trying to say, because there's huge egos on the way. So I have to, I always appreciate that now there are three of us, and also including our core team members, has been past that moment, that level. And now that we know each other really well, that sometimes we just put our ego down and trying to listen to what that person's suggesting.
How hard was that to do? And what did you do to allow you to put egos to one side? Because many teams really struggle with that.
Very simply, you just listen. You just listen. Sometimes that person, whoever is talking to you, say something that you're not really 100% agree with, but maybe you have a perfect answer to reply to it, reply to that person. Or maybe you just think that idea is completely wrong, or whatever that person's trying to say is completely wrong, it, but just wait until that person finished talking and then say what you're trying to say. I think that part is really hard, especially when you have a lot of other works and you're busy and you have to sometimes cut. But yeah, still, behind every ego, there's something really important that you cannot miss.
So something about making yourself, suspending your own thinking that's going on in your own head, because that might be thinking they're wrong, and making yourself listen. And certainly one of the tips I used to get taught was, as you're listening to somebody, try and summarize what they're saying in your head as well as listen to it. So at least you're completely focused on what they're saying.
Yeah, and trying to see the problems from their point of view. That's also really important, because, a lot of the time, you never do that work by yourself. You never write a code, or you're trying to see a step by step what that person do, and then why that person is saying that. That also really helps the issue, finding the issue.
One of the other things I found interesting is that lots of people have said to me that introverts don't like to get out of their comfort zone. Now, I guess you must have had to take a big reshape your comfort zone as you founded this company and grew it from there. Tell us a little bit about that.
Talking to you right now is the biggest example of I'm being out of my comfort zone. So yes,
well, I'm really scary, honest.
I know, it is hard, but I think I'm getting used to it.
So what do you do to enable you to gradually stretch your comfort zone so you become comfortable with more things?
We've got this company initiated called Erxis, and we have huge dream. Obviously, that's how it has been initiated. It's just like a baby between three of us, and we just like any parents, we want our baby succeed, and we just do it like what I'm doing, just getting out of my comfort zone, doing whatever I have to do is just like any other parents doing what they had to do for the sake of their babies. So yeah, I think.
And so.
Yeah, I mean, nobody's going to talk about your business same as you do. Because the vision, and it's just that word comes from your mouth is a lot different, than a lot more impactful and true than it would come out of anyone else's mouth. So yeah, I think that's why I push myself to be here.
Thank you. So could I ask for a tip for an introvert, and perhaps an introvert that's thinking and has the dreams of creating such a great company as yours? One tip that you'd offer an introvert?
Just be yourself and do what you love to do and accept everyone's difference. Yeah, as long as you know what you love to do and
focus on what's right for you and what
Yeah.
you love. Okay. And how about a tip for an extrovert, bearing in mind that extroverts might have to manage some of these introverts in their growing company? How would you advise an extrovert?
I think same as I have mentioned earlier, just accept everyone's different and trying to listen to people more and be patient, trying to understand the problem and point from their perspective, point of view. Because you're not gonna succeed without everybody. You're not going to succeed by yourself. So you have to accept the fact that everyone's different and understand each other.
Thank you. And now I'm sure that some of the listeners will want to get back in touch with you. What's the best place for them to do that?
I'm available on LinkedIn with the same name, Noran Butchergo.
Okay. So if I put the link to your LinkedIn profile on the sleeve notes to this show then?
Yeah.
Brilliant. Thank you. It's been really lovely to talk to you.
Great. Thank you for having me, John.
What would you like to know about introversion in business? Visit activateyourinTrovert.co.uk and ask your question there. Join me on the show to discuss it if you like, or I could just answer it on the show, like this week's question from Philip. Are introverts or extroverts more egotistical? It's also interesting as ego came up quite a bit when we were talking with Noran. It's one that I often get asked. From some people there's an assumption that loud, talkative extroverts are all crushingly egotistical, and that's a bad thing. But then, from others, there's a statement that introverts are egotistical, as they keep quiet about their feelings and act in a smug way, looking down on people. Of course, nobody likes to be looked down on or treated as if the person speaking to you is superior, whether introverted or extroverted. Nobody likes to be ignored or constantly overtalked. But let's jump back and consider what being egotistical means, and the fact that we all have ego. Your ego is your conscious mind, the part of you that you consider yourself. It's a psychological term popularized by Freud, meaning the awareness of one's identity and existence. When most people say someone has a big ego, they probably mean he's too full of himself. So ego gets a bit of a bad rap, and is often confused with megalomania or vanity. Getting your energy from being with other people doesn't mean you have an oversized ego. Doing so and always over-talking people, constantly proclaiming how good you are and not listening and learning from others might mean you have a big ego. But before introverts listening smugly nod their heads, many introverts are not taking the actions that help them improve and become the person they could be because they have a big ego. Egotistical introverts will be quiet and smug, always trying to prove how smart they are. They never accept blame for errors or misfortunes. But if somebody stops and thinks quietly before responding, that's not a superiority thing. An introvert thinks before they speak, collects information and mulls it over. That's not an ego thing, it is simply a different way of processing information from the way that an extrovert does. So there we go, introversion, extroversion and ego, not really linked at all. What's your opinion? Follow on Facebook and discuss your thoughts and your answers at the show's page. Activate your introvert. I'm John Baker. Thank you for listening. I hope you found it useful. There's a new episode every Thursday at activateyourinTrovert.co.uk and your favourite podcast provider. Till then, go be introversial, activating your introverts, building your business.